Welcome, everyone, to our peer exchange this afternoon. My name is Dub Taylor. I'm with the Energy Services Coalition, where I serve as Executive Director. And this afternoon, in our series of trainings and support webinars and such we're doing in conjunction with the Department of Energy's ESPC campaign, we're focusing today on a really unique project in a peer exchange format. So this is a project that was done in North Carolina in conjunction with the North Carolina Department of Adult Corrections, as well as the State Energy Office there, and with obviously their ESPC contractor and other parties. The ESC, we profiled this in a case study that's on our website under the ESPC campaign, but we decided it's really a unique enough story and such a great application of ESPC that it was worthwhile to do a peer exchange on it. So today we're going to jump in. We'll have the folks from North Carolina that were involved talking more about the project itself. And there'll be an opportunity for everyone that's joined us here to ask questions as we get to that point after the presentation. So the idea is for this to be kind of a free exchange of information, learning from one another. How did you do this? Where did the idea come from? How did you use your existing tools? All these sorts of things. And we'll go ahead and get started. So this is, we are recording, so we'll provide a link later so you can share this with your colleagues if they're unable to join in person or live today. This is a Zoom meeting format, so essentially everyone's in the same meeting, so you can raise your hand or unmute if you have a question, or drop your question in the chat box. We'll have an opportunity to take a lot of questions toward the end. And again, unmute or raise your hand if you want to join in. So today, again, our learning objective, how interagency collaboration and public-private partnerships can amplify the impact of energy savings performance contracts and their various benefits. Today, we're going to first start off with some introductions of our speakers. We're going to cover the project scope, go into stakeholder engagement, how all that came together, some of the challenges and how those were overcome. Again, we'll have a Q&A and discussion, and then we'll close with a reminder of different resources and tools that are available through the Department of Energy and other sites and other resources, as well as a couple of upcoming events that you can join in. So introductions. So my name is Dub Taylor, again, Executive Director of the Energy Services Coalition. Joined today with my colleagues, Jamie Garrett, who won't be presenting, but is here with us, as well as Chris Halpin. Chris will take the lead on questions as we get to that portion today. You may have seen Chris before on webinars as he's done a lot of our trainings. And then Paul Braese, who is the Sustainability, Efficiency, and Resilience Services Manager at the North Carolina Department of Correction, and then Hayward Fain, who's with the State Energy Office, the Program Manager for ESPC projects with the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. So we're glad to be able to hear directly from the folks involved in North Carolina in this project, and I think you're going to get a lot out of this. So about the ESC, the Energy Services Coalition, we're a national nonprofit comprised of experts in the public and private sector. The idea is to help disseminate information, best practices, lessons learned, the rising tide lifts all boats approach, and getting more out of energy savings performance contracting. We have different local chapters. I would say that our chapter in North Carolina is probably among the most active, if not the most active. Also very active is Colorado and New Mexico. So great chapter activity, get plugged into those local chapters through the Energy Services Coalition. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our guests from North Carolina and experts. And Paul Braese is first. I'm going to have Paul take the slide on the project scope, the history, and then sort of jump into it. So Paul, take it away.
Sure. Thank you for this opportunity. The first thing I want to state is that we were not intentionally trying to become the largest project in the state or to have any other accolades in regards to this project. Really, our goal was to make sure that we could start putting downward pressure on the utility spend while at the same time trying to make sure that we do things like improve security, safety, improve human comfort, because all of those things are important to our program. I do think it's important to note the bottom two items in regards to the solar. It's important to point out that it was because of the collaboration and because of the importance of solar to leadership at the Department of Adult Correction that ultimately something came forth from that effort. Next. So some of the drivers, actually might say some of the challenges with our program is that at the time in 2017, our spend was over 47 million. What we found out is that water is a big spend of ours. You have to think of prisons as miniature cities. Water is a much larger user than most other institutions, but some of it's been driven by water leaks also. At the time, to address water efficiency, we only had about $200,000. $200,000 to address all efficiency, basically a $47 million spend, 14 million square feet. So that's rather challenging. Water management systems, which are kind of the BAS controls for water for your toilets and for your sinks and prison facilities, they are very cost effective, typically 30 to 40% savings, but they're very expensive to implement. And of course, when you're trying to compete against other R&R repair and renovation needs, it's very difficult to justify those items. Our deferred maintenance is approaching almost $2 billion. We are also installing literally over $100 million in air conditioning as 30% of our facilities are not yet air conditioned. We have staffing shortages. Many of our BS systems are obsolete. So you can see that there's a lot of challenges that we face. The first effort that we took towards trying to address that is the Public Utility Commission for North Carolina has a carve out for electrical users using more than 1 million kilowatt hours or more for your large utility companies. And what's good about that is you can opt out of the energy efficiency tariffs. The challenge for us is that if we reduced our utility bill by not paying those tariffs, that money just got absorbed in the general budget and was spent elsewhere. And so we were able to find a way to work with our budget office as well as state budget to be able to pull those funds back into our program, which resulted in about $750,000 a year. However, beer math told me that if we're going to reduce our consumption to the 40% based upon Executive Order 80, which is noted below, is that we're going to need at least $100 million, if not more. So basically, we really had no funding mechanism for funding all this. What the good news was that Governor Cooper at the time issued Executive Order 80, which basically said reduce your energy utility consumption by 40% by, Hayward's going to have to help me at this point. Is it 20? I can't remember the year that was supposed to be reduced, but we're supposed to
2025.
2025. Thank you. So the challenge with that is that we don't have the funding. And because of DEQ and experts like Hayward on that team, they really leaned forward and said, if we're going to help all of these cabinet agencies who report to the governor, we need to have funding. And it did result in substantial funding for us, about $20 million. But based upon that beer math, needing $100 million or more, it still wasn't going to get us there. The biggest challenge was that what are the other mechanisms to do that in performance contracting was the mechanism. The biggest challenge was the fact that we had a previous performance contract and it did not save money. It was based upon what we call stipulated savings. You take a measure before the project starts, you take a measure after, then the performance contractor gets to say, this is how much money we've saved, whether that's realistic or not. Finally, the former secretary was very interested in solar. So we wanted to make sure as we started pursuing the potential for a performance contract that we also incorporated solar into that project. Next. These were the energy efficiency measures that we decided to implement. To be fair, our mission statement talks about cost-effective energy solutions, sustainable solutions that also improve security, reduce maintenance pressures, reduce deferred maintenance, improve training quality, et cetera. So they were chosen based upon, did it bring money to the table so we could drive projects that also reduce deferred maintenance and those other items that we just talked about. I think it's important to note that when you look at water efficiency upgrades, there was a site that the water management systems did not have a payback because the facility was being underutilized at that time. What's also important is that the control systems at those sites were literally obsolete, but we're only able to fund 3 of those. And what's important is because of the performance contract mechanism, we ultimately were able to use those Executive Order 80 R&R funds to fund the remainder of those. It's also interesting to note here the envelope upgrades. Typically that's low-hanging fruit, but in our case, we have cast concrete construction, and there are literally 1-inch gaps between the concrete panels. So that was also a way to address deferred maintenance. And finally, down at the bottom, the building advisor, this goes back towards the training and developing the expertise needed to operate our facilities. This program, many performance contractors have these programs, but basically that gets monitored on a weekly basis. And then in turn, they reach out to the site and provide training to the site so that they can make sure their systems are maintained. Next. What's interesting about this timeline is the amount of time it took to get leadership on board. It was about a 3-year period to go with the performance contract again. What's very important is that some of those levers were Executive Order 80, driving more energy efficient operation. So that led our leadership to consider this once again. The other thing is that our leadership immediately above us said, what didn't work well in the previous performance contract? As an example, the water management systems didn't save money. Why? Because we are typically the largest water user in many of those localities. And if we reduce water usage, they just increase our bill. And so it was very important with this new contract that was taken into consideration prior to us approving any of these water and energy efficiency measures. Next. Another important aspect of this is that you can think of this as a design build concept on steroids. So if there's particular equipment you want, you can specify that as your standard. The performance contractor will still compete it, but it's going to be the equipment that you need. Another thing is there are other R&R deficiencies, maintenance deficiencies. In the case of our facilities, leadership wanted a new type of correctional grade lighting fixture. And we're able to fund that, not as part of the main project, but as a change order to that. So there was a lot of value being brought to this contract above and beyond the cost of the performance contract. In fact, there's going to be another solar system installed at one of our sites through a grant, and that's being attached to this project. Next. As I mentioned before, the challenge with just doing calculations before and after stipulated savings is that there really is no guarantee of the savings. Every year, the performance contractor gets to say, we save millions of dollars, the same amount every single year. It was for that reason that option C was critical for us as we made this selection. What was also important to us is that we had monthly reports, because if there were any challenges with the actual savings, we want to make sure that they get addressed quickly and on a regular basis to ensure we're driving the savings. What was also included in this is that the performance contractor is going to have regular meetings to remind everyone, wardens, site maintenance, and so forth, what the requirements of the project are, and to remind them that, yes, in fact, we do have a performance project in place. because as you know, people leave, wardens leave, facility managers leave, and we need to make sure that we had continuity as that occurred. Next. What are the lessons learned? Some of the most important one is really about the selection of the performance contractor, and it's making sure that in your specifications, make sure that what you're looking for is someone who can be a partner with you and has the background and experience to help you in this process. That even has a demonstrated history of guaranteeing that the savings were there. So the performance contract selected helped in that effort. The fact is that with solar, we know we wanted to include solar, but we're not solar experts. And having someone on board who has that expertise was instrumental in driving the relationships needed to make it happen at our facility. For us, the important thing is that what's very helpful, we're having two people in place. One, a project manager with a lot of experience. Even though performance contracting is different, it's still project management. Then myself being the energy manager, because I don't have to manage the project, I can focus on making sure that the energy savings actually occurred. What's also critical is making sure that you have a performance contractor not a performance contractor, a third-party consultant who has the background and experience and is willing to call out the performance contractor and say, hey, it's working or not working. And just as critical are the resources from the Department of Environmental Quality, such as Hayward Fain, and to rely on their expertise to assist you in the effort. Next. Well, this talks about the project highlights as far as our solar and goals. It really, when you look at NCDAC, it's really about all of the project, because not only did we want to make sure it was cost effective and sustainable, we also wanted to make sure that it was implemented in a way that had multiple benefits, such as improving the maintainability, improving the reliability, with the control systems, making sure that all the occupants, whether they are the officers or the offenders, is going to be improved. What the value to the other entities are listed here. And of course, the State Energy Office had several areas that were important to them. Next. When we talk about the structure for the solar system, really what's critical is if you look at what happens all the way over to the right with our performance contractor and the relationship with Brunswick Electric. The fact is we were not subject matter experts in solar. Having someone who knows the ins and outs of that, some of your large performance contractors have that expertise and have the depth to get it and bring it to the table. We were very fortunate to be able to say, yes, we want to consider solar, but please, you need to go out there, talk to the utilities and determine what can be accomplished. What's interesting about this is that these are electrical co-ops that operate the utilities at the 1,000 cell facilities. In particular, we had direct interaction with Brunswick Electric after initial contact with them and Schneider Electric, because what they stated to us in a meeting was, we're interested in this. We don't think you're going to gain traction with the other co-ops simply because they don't have the bandwidth or the background to do it. But if you utilize us in this effort and we partner with this, we think that they will come on board for future projects. And we'll touch on that in just in a different slide. But it's important to recognize that really it was that relationship with our performance contractor that allowed all these other relationships to occur. Next. So with the focus on the solar systems, this is not a massively large, but it is a large solar system at the site. What's most important is what I just discussed was the relationship between Schneider Electric and Brunswick Electric as well as ourselves in order to make that happen. The other thing to note is that this was a 20-year contract. We would have preferred a 15-year contract. Unfortunately, everything we wanted to do that addressed things besides energy efficiency or in addition to energy efficiency really drove us to that 20-year contract. And I think Hayward may want to say something here.
There I am. No, I agree wholeheartedly. The 15-year would be I think that's what you're looking at. But the 20, make sure you were able to get all of those things involved. And even if I go back to just some of the lessons learned just about the project and just from the state energy office perspective, from the state energy office standpoint, this contract just provided a number of just valuable insights that basically reinforce what works and revealing areas where our supports make the greatest impacts, and some things we can also do better in the process. One thing was early involvement leads to stronger projects. So being engaged from that conceptual phase, of course, allows us to kind of guide, entities through the requirements, technical feasibility, the financial structuring. So the early engagement definitely helps avoid those downstream issues. The policy alignment was pretty powerful in this performance contract. With DAC framing the project within the goals of EO 80 or Executive Order 80, and made the value proposition clear to the decision makers involved. It also reminded us that performance contracts are not just financial tools, but vehicles for delivering state climate and sustainability mandates as well. Another thing would be that oversight needs to be structured but supportive. And as a reviewer of the IGA, investment grade audit or RFP, and the M&V plans, we have structures in place here at the State Energy Office, but we want it's not just compliance, but it's more of being a partner throughout the process. So balancing that accountability with the collaboration was pretty essential in this project as well. One thing we learned here at the State Energy Office that the institutional memory matters. So throughout this process, some might know we saw how turnover and competing priorities can disrupt continuity within the agency. So providing technical continuity and document management for our office, kind of helped, throughout this process. And throughout the process, I remember quite vividly speaking to Paul and like, man, we really have to write a lessons learned immediately after, when this is done. And this is very instrumental. And of course, I was so happy when ESPC campaign kind of picked this up. They saw the value of it, and I think it's very helpful. Another thing was that was learned from the Energy Office perspective. Interagency coordination is a skill. It's not a given. So we often assume agencies naturally work together, but this project definitely reminded us and anybody who kind of looked in that coordination it has to be intentional and continuously managed. And so when you look at the third party, the ESCO, and then the owner, and then when you bring in another party, like the co-ops, you have all these, these entities in here, and basically you need to create space for conversation and align those diverse perspectives around these common goals. I think they did an excellent job. Another thing I think was learned was third-party consultants are definitely worth the investment. The role of a trusted owner's rep cannot be overstated, and I think it was played out perfectly in this project. Their presence just allowed, DAC to focus on a lot of the big picture decisions, and the third party rep just ensure that technical and that oversight that was needed. And I think just the last thing I'll say is that success stories, one success story can spark many. And perhaps most importantly, we learned that success is contagious. Since DAC completing this project, um, we basically revived ESPCs in the state. We received tons of calls and inquiries of how to kind of get it going, how do we start, and it's not just for correctional facilities, but you go to universities, community colleges, and local governments. So momentum builds when others see what's possible, and I think DAC is a perfect example of this. Back to you, Paul.
Sure. One final comment that I will make is that it's very important to understand that this isn't simple. There's complexities to it. There's different layers to it. It's very important to talk to your subject matter experts, whoever they may be, whether it's in state, whether it's DEQ, out of state, to make sure that you are, to the best of your ability, covering all the different concerns that will happen. I like to say, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. So planning for contingencies is very helpful. Next. So this has been important enough for us to consider this for another site. In this particular case, I mentioned that the 1,000-cell facilities constitute many of our largest facilities, but Central Prison by far is the largest, as well as the largest user. What was important, though, is the previous secretary had expressed that interest in solar, and again, we are not the solar experts. So how do you try to maximize your solar footprint? And the way that we felt this could happen, use your performance contractor. They have the depth, breadth, and experience to be able to tell you whether it's going to work or not. So the unusual wrinkle to what we're proposing is, yes, we want you to look at energy efficiency at the Central Prison site, but we want you to look at solar throughout all of our facilities. It's important to recognize that in the current contract, all of these facilities were similar, and that allowed for us to have a large project. In this particular case, we're looking at one facility, but we are still keeping that scope of solar. While it is potentially very large, it's still a very similar thing throughout the project. And hopefully, and it looks very possible, not only will we get more solar sites, but we'll also be able to drive savings towards our automation systems. Next.
Thank you, Paul and Hayward. Really excellent overview. As always, these projects have a tremendous level of technical detail and also policy detail. So I think that was really kind of a great summary. It's always a lot to digest, but a great illustration. So we're now going to move into the Q&A portion of today's peer exchange, and I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Chris Halpin. And the idea here is these are some discussion questions that working on this case study came to mind for us, and they may also be questions that you have as an attendee today. You're not limited by any means, but these are really some prompts to think about. So if you have questions, excuse me, you can raise your hand, you can unmute. And if one of these questions is aligned with the one you have, then in that chat, you can say, hey, I'm thinking of question number 3 or question number 6, and that'll provide some direction as Chris moderates. So Chris, are you on?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you. So let me turn it over to you,
Okay,
and you
great.
may want to walk through some of these things and see what questions we may have from our participants today and moderate that.
All right, great. Thanks, Dub. Hayward, Paul, great job. Such an interesting project. It's really nice to see the coordination that you're able to have between all the different entities here. It's amazing. So I did actually have a question myself that's not on the list here, but I saw at the very end of the last slide. Actually, do we have any questions from the audience? I can't quite see from here if we have any. Okay, there we go, from Miracle Wilson. Interesting question 4. So what role did workforce development and training, especially for offenders and staff, play in the project's value proposition, and how can others incorporate similar elements into their ESPC efforts? So Paul, Hayward, what do you think of this?
You could take that, Paul. That's a wonderful question. Paul has that answer.
So there are performance contractors that have a very focused emphasis on offender training. The challenge for us, speaking historically, everything is a cost. Nothing is for free. So if you do a program like that, it brings value to our offenders, which is so important. Unfortunately, it doesn't bring value to the project from a financial perspective. So we didn't feel we could consider it as a primary option. However, what we are doing is that part of the performance contract, there is a certain amount of funding that is set aside for this project specifically for training. And while the starting point is going to be for our staff, the ending point, we want it to be for offenders too. And the way that we're approaching that is the performance contractor said, hey, here's the funding. What all type of training do you want to accomplish? And the way that is structured is this is not just for the 1,000-cell facilities. This training is for everyone. We know that we can't provide hands-on training or field training, or we can, but it's going to be limited. So in addition to that, we have a system we call the LMS, Learning Management System, where it's that online training. Many states may already have this, where you've got required training throughout the year. You go through the training, you answer the questions, you pass, and then you're successful in that particular training. We're doing the same thing. We're going to do that with lighting, with building automation systems, and with other areas of maintenance where we're developing the training, we're having it developed for us. It will be available via the LMS system. And then we will go to the sites and say, hey, if you really want to develop your team, then make sure that this training is required. The facilities managers can set that up and say, this is required training for you. And that's going to be the start of the stepping stone for our program, which we call performance-driven maintenance. Because like we tell people is that we're no longer driving 67 Chevys, we're running 747 Boeings, and we're not giving our maintenance team the operating manuals nor the maintenance manuals to repair them. So we feel this is a first start effort to help mitigate those concerns. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that was great, comprehensive answer, Paul. Hey, Beatrice, I'm glad you could join. So Beatrice Geraldo from California Department of Justice wants to know, oops, just went away, hang on. Look, she wants to learn more about the priority process for the energy savings measures that were implemented.
Well, the obvious ones were what's the low-hanging fruit? And the low-hanging fruit was retrofitting from T8 lamp technology or T12 technology to the LED lighting. The envelope was a relatively low-hanging fruit. From there, it really, if you're not aware of this, they develop a matrix of all the different opportunities, the different paybacks, and you pick and choose. From there, it really was a focus on what is the value it's going to bring to address deferred maintenance or address maintenance pressures. Obviously, LED lighting will last longer, so that will reduce maintenance pressures. As mentioned, the automation systems were obsolete. And the challenge with that is that it was a proprietary system that was installed. And every time you needed to buy a new module, because the old module couldn't be repaired, you're talking $10,000 plus. And with the sites lacking that expertise of knowing how the systems operate, how much it should cost, they really didn't have a choice. And so this was the opportunity for us to go to our new design standards, as well as what we call our graphic standards, which is going to provide a common graphical interface across all of our facilities so that everything looks the same and it presents information in the same way and hopefully in a powerful way that makes it easier for those individuals to use this system. The envelope was an easy one because we wanted feedback from facilities management, from the wardens, and that was mentioned as one of the issues, that there were the big gaps between the concrete panels. And so we included that because it had a payback, as well as the fact that it reduced deferred maintenance. I think the important thing to mention is the word conservation is not in our vocabulary. It's just not there. It's got to be efficiency, and it's got to bring value in other ways than just saving money. It's got to bring value to the people who are in the building.
There's great points, Paul. You know, one of the things I think that you pointed out is somewhat overlooked with performance contracting is, yes, it's mostly about, you got to save money, provide value, but just what you said about bringing in new graphic user interfaces, making these people's jobs who are already very difficult, right? They typically aren't quite paid as much as their peers in some areas. The deferred maintenance is always a burden. Giving them the tools that they need to really do a job that's more efficient overall, so they can spend time getting back to like preventive maintenance versus reactive maintenance. That's, for me, makes a huge difference, and I'm glad you're able to make that work for you in this project. So do we have any other questions from the audience? I think that was it. Anyone else? Okay. Right. Well, let's go to the prompts here. So what were some of the biggest challenges in coordinating across the multiple state agencies, both utilities, right? You had the retail and sort of the wholesale utility, and how are they addressed to ensure the success of this project?
I don't mind starting that. I think the starting place is the fact is that we had a relationship with DEQ, and they're the ones who have the subject matter expertise on performance contracting. As Hayward mentioned, there was some lessons learned because people have left, and then of course you've got new people coming in, having to learn the processes. But that was a very important piece. The other important piece, to be frank, is performance contractor. There's just a lot of things. I'd like to consider ourselves experts in some things, but we're not an expert in everything. And so, and of course, time. No one has time, right? So, but the performance contractor, because one, they're going to ultimately get paid, they have the bandwidth and the depth, if it's a good one, to address those areas and make sure that it happens.
Okay, great. Excellent answer. And Hayward, do you have anything to add to that about the coordination that was required?
Not too much. I think Paul kind of summed it up.
Okay.
That coordination was, paramount. What I did want to go to just that the highlight, I think, of seeing a lot of the details of the performance contract was just, that training piece. How Paul and DAC was able to really drill down the exact training needed for his facility staff, and then project and look toward the future for a lot of the staff and a lot of the needs that even past his time, maybe when he's gone, will still be able to be implemented. I think it was excellent, and I think that's something that I think people really need to know as well.
All right, that's great. Paul, follow up to that, I was interested in. So one of the reasons that this project is so unique is that you have the utility owns the solar system, right? Because in North Carolina, you can't do a third-party PPA. So how does that affect how the system gets operated, maintained, paying the bills back and forth, because they own the whole thing, but yet you're using the electricity? Can you explain to the audience here a little bit about how that actually works?
Sure, and again, I'm not
terms.
the subject matter expert simply because a lot of that is worked out in the details between the performance contractor and even in the electrical co-op. What I can tell you is that the solar system is behind the meter, and the fact that they maintain the system. So we really, it's a win-win for us, because yes, we're getting some monetary value for that to drive projects, and it is solar, it's renewable, yet we don't have to worry about the maintenance. We don't have to worry about anything. So it's a very unique situation and very much helpful for us.
All right, that's great. That's certainly unique. So this next one, looks like we still have a few more minutes. How did the project team evaluate and prioritize the various different technologies? Oh, wait, here, Beatrice has another question. You said that the PVs are owned by co-ops. How does it work for the RECs, the renewable energy credits? Great question, Beatrice.
I'll have to be frank, and I really don't know. I don't know who owns the RECs, but unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to answer that question. And to be frank, for me, RECs are great, and particularly if you have a program where you're trying to document, reductions in carbon emissions. For us, it was about how is it reducing costs, because we know if it reduces costs, it's going to reduce, utility usage, and it's going to reduce carbon. So that has been our focus.
Yep.
Hayward, thank you for that question. We can definitely get that answer for you, and I'll personally deliver it to you myself. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep. And I think in general, RECs tend to follow the ownership of the asset. So it's going to probably Brunswick, but since they're a nonprofit, I don't know if they were able to get the investment tax credit, right? You would have had to apply for the IRA funding and all that. So it'd be interesting to find out exactly how that works. But yeah, appreciate that follow-up, Beatrice. So this next question is about, how did you really evaluate and prioritize everything?
I think we lost you, Chris. Chris, can you repeat that question?
So were you able to hear that? My phone rang while I was asking the question.
Yeah.
So it's answered to
we
number
hear
2.
you now.
Yeah. All right. Sorry about that.
So in regards to the second question, here's what was really critical about the success of this program. It was a governor who basically said climate change is important and put forward efforts, executive orders to address it. And because of that, that's a big lever for us because, we're just little players in this big pond of people. And, the reality is correctional facilities are about how do you keep everyone safe and how do you ultimately get offenders back into society? It's not about energy efficiency. So by having those executive orders, we get to raise our hand and say, ooh, by the way, this is important. This is something the governor wants, and the governor will want the secretaries to desire this. So the priorities were based primarily on low-hanging fruit, and then what did the sites need to reduce deferred maintenance or reduce maintenance itself. However, as noted here, there's the EV infrastructure and the solar ESA. Those particularly were driven primarily because of Executive Order 80 and the other executive orders. So it gave us an opportunity. What I will say is that even the EV infrastructure saved us money. So it brought value to the table. I'll also say that with correctional facilities, everything's behind the fence or multiple fences. And so EV infrastructure can be very expensive. And I was resistant to having utility-owned metered specifically for EVs, but they were because I don't like utility owning anything. But there was a payback. And so that's why we have EV stations at 4 sites, further promoting one of the efforts that Executive Order 80 and some of the other orders were important. And hopefully we will continue to drive those as long as it makes financial sense. In regards to the water management systems, water's 49% of our water and sewer is 49% of our spend. It's massive. While there are leaks, we had leaks that cost us $1 million a year, just a couple of leaks. They're very expensive, but it's water usage because the offenders use water to communicate. They flush notes down the toilet. They will stuff the toilets with sheets, flood the cells. So having a product that saves 30 to 40% of your water usage while also preventing the offenders from wreaking havoc, while also helping with contraband searches, because you can announce a search, tell everyone that, oh, we're going to have a search, and everyone starts trying to flush things down the toilet, but you've already shut off the system, but it's still monitoring who's trying to flush. And so there's great benefit. And then what if there's an offender who has mental health issues and doesn't flush at all? Then you can help flush for them. So great water savings, but guess what? It also provided a value to our project and to our team.
That's amazing, truly amazing. I think you pretty much already answered number 3, how it aligned with the state policies, which is great. You talked to number 4. And number 5, how's the M&V option or options probably ultimately selected?
It's a great question. It's a critical question. As I mentioned before, we were using stipulated savings, and basically you could save, you could increase utility usage, and yet the performance contract will be able to show a decrease in utility usage for whatever the circumstances. Like in the case of us with water management, the utility just raised the water rates because we were the biggest user. So for us, you got to see the savings. And that's why option C was critical. Prior to us releasing the RFP, there would be vendors, performance contractors who would come to us, and I'd be very full disclosure and say, you know, I'm telling you, we're not going to enter into a contract where we're losing money because the rates have changed. And this is important to us. You know, y'all need to check this stuff out. And that was before we issued the RFP. You know, after the RFP, you've got to remain silent. And even option C was mentioned. So really, when you have those preliminary discussions, once the RFP is released and you have put into the contract what's important to you, and at that point, I'm not sure if we mentioned specifically option C, but I can tell you that was a driving point when we went through evaluations. If the performance contractor, if you looked at all their successes, and they're all successful, right? Or they may have a few issues, but they're all successful. It's very easy to look at, okay, what were the savings every year? And if they were all the same for every single year, that's very telling to us. If it varied every year, it probably meant they were using option C. And so looking at option C and making it part of the criteria of the performance contract, RFP, and the evaluation was absolutely critical. To be frank, I wouldn't do it any other way. I couldn't trust it any other way. And I'll add one other piece is the value is during the construction phase, we said we want to start having these meetings to confirm we're getting the savings or not. And the savings weren't, remember, it's during construction, so you're not getting all the savings at that time, but it allowed us to peek into whether it's happening or not. And there were cases where water usage went up. So we could immediately go, hey, site, what's going on? Or to the contractor, what's happening? And in this case, because of Helene, you know, hundreds and hundreds of offenders were added to a facility. So that increase in water usage wasn't because the water management system didn't work. It's that there were a bunch of offenders added to the site. So again, measurement M&V C, option C is, wouldn't do it any other way.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Great answer. Any lessons learned from using historically underutilized businesses?
I don't know that I can truly speak to that. The state of North Carolina has a strong hub desired participation rate. So it was basically us concluding that as part of the criteria. And if you make it part of the criteria, then that's part of the performance contractor has to bring to the table. And our contractor was very successful in doing that. And I would venture to say that they should be, because they've got the resources to really search deep for contractors.
Right. Okay, great. Dub, I'm going to hand it back over to you. I need to get running.
Okay, great.
Thank
Appreciate
you all.
it, Chris.
Paul, Hayward, great job. Great job, everybody.
Right. We're going to
Take
wrap
care.
up here, and so stick with us for just a few more minutes, and we'll bring this to a close, hopefully right on time. So just kind of a recap of some resources available and also some upcoming events you can participate in. We did a detailed review of a lot of these resources a week ago. If you attended that training, you'll be getting a copy of the slides and recording, which will provide direct links to all these, but a whole host of resources on EPX, which is a measurement tool that's available through Lawrence Berkeley Lab. If you are not yet a member of the campaign or a partner, you can join up here through the Better Buildings program. Look at the, expression of interest here. Through the Better Buildings program, a number of tools, the ESPC toolkit, FEMP, which is the federal component for ESPC, has a number of tools that translate well to local, state and local ESPC projects. And then different reports, the IPMVP, again, measurement verification, the appropriate sort of level of measurement depending on the measure that's being installed, and then guidance on M&V for facilities owners. So a lot of different resources here that are available to you. Upcoming events. So July 30th, we'll have our final July, sort of this big sweep of events that we've organized in July. And the idea here is really kind of a recap, putting pen to paper on the tools to get you started. When we started the campaign and the related trainings, we sort of kind of went bit by bit, steps 1 through 5 of a project. This will kind of sum all that up. So hopefully will be a good tool to allow you to move projects forward. Then the other thing is we are available to provide direct technical assistance that is funded and provided through the Department of Energy if you have a particular project. So I know Beatrice is on now, and they have taken advantage of this, and hopefully that has been of value, and that is available to other partners as well. So the process for gaining technical assistance is to sign up through this form, and then we'll be in touch with you and be able to work with you on an individual basis to work through issues you have. So that's that link will be available on the slides you'll get as well. And that is all we have for today. I've had a touchy finger here, make sure I didn't miss anything. There we go. If you have any questions at all, you can email the ESPC campaign here. You can also contact us at the Energy Services Coalition, and feel free to ping me directly, D. Taylor at Energy Services Coalition, if you have any questions. And look for a copy of the slides from today, as well as a link to recording that you can share with colleagues if they were not able to attend live today. And hopefully you'll join us at the end of the month for the final July training. And with that, we'll conclude and have a good rest of your day.